Well, they're sort of in a funnel or a high tower where they think they know everything. But we've done surveys over the years of people joining Vistage, the CEO joining Vistage. It's not that you don't know what you're doing. It is you can run a real powerful business with 8 people, 9 people, 15, and then you start getting 20. Can you manage 20 people? And you can't use a 7 because that's a cop-out. Relationships an 8. We found out that most of them had a 6.
And a CEO who won't, because the one who's asking for help is obviously on a path of growth, where someone who won't ask for advice from others.
If you're not, in the beginning, it's a rough ride because you're caught in your habits. I'll say to them, driving in today, I wish there was one billboard that was in front of FAU, and the billboard would have a warning sign on it and saying,
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 9 of the Molding You podcast. I'm Jonathan Dickler, and I'm honored to be joined by Chet Tart, extraordinary entrepreneur, podcaster. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thank you, Jonathan, for the invite.
Yeah, and it's funny, crazy story about how we met a few days ago in this very podcast studio.
Right.
And it just shows to go you that I had a passion for podcasting, but you don't realize that you just will meet awesome people on the journey and it'll take you in unexpected directions. So we were just talking about how you podcast and you've done 290.
If we can find them, I did 290, but you could find 72 from what you told me so far.
Yeah, so
they're sitting somewhere. We just don't know where they are. I have a partner I do with, Terry Lyles, and his son has been messing with it where we're changing titles and things like that. So there could be other ones in other places.
Yeah, so you've done tons of podcasts, probably more than you're in the 1% of podcasts.
I didn't know that.
I think if you're over 100, you're basically in the 1%, which doesn't mean you're making a bunch of money off it or whatever. But so what got you into podcasting?
My background has been in the radio business, and Terry Lyles was a psychologist who I brought to the radio station at one time to really help with the staff and really align things. And we just became friends. The radio business started going backwards. I got out of the business and I got into the coaching business. And eventually I got a call from somebody who says, you should join Vistage. And Vistage is a CEO roundtable where we sit down with 12 to 15 CEOs. I have 2 groups. And we have speaker people come in with content, talking about different things that help them. We focus on certain things. And then in the afternoon, it's basically issue-oriented, and that's why it's confidential. We talk about personal, we talk about business, and we talk about health. And our job is to help each other, hold each other accountable to get better. So I've been doing Terry and I were talking, and I got Terry in to be a speaker at Vistage Worldwide. And he said, we should do a podcast. We know so many people. We talk to a lot of people. And let's get back into what we did for a living.
Yeah, and it's nice how podcasting is kind of like the new radio, where they used to say, oh, you have a good face for radio, right?
Right.
And then
now I'm going to be on YouTube. What?
Yeah, and you definitely have the voice for radio. But now podcasting is kind of a little more visual, but super interesting, and I've been fascinated with psychology recently, and people think business is not related to psychology or physical fitness. Like, I don't have to be in shape. I just have to make a bunch of money. But then what good is that money when you don't have your health?
Absolutely.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
So so you guys focus on fitness there too, and the psychological side. It's almost like therapy.
Well, it is and it isn't. We look at blind sides. We ask questions. It's set up in a way where, let's say you have an issue in business, health, or whatever. It's set up in a way that you have to state that issue. You have to be crystal clear on it. And then the group repeats it. Is that what you really meant? And then after that, we ask questions before we give advice, because every CEO likes to give advice. And when you ask a lot of questions, you'll find out that maybe the issue wasn't the issue. And that's what's powerful about Vistage.
Yeah, like people will say, well, my issue is I'm not making this X amount of revenue, but what's behind that? And I think it's super interesting you described it as CEOs are coming here for help. And I think that's such an important concept of getting another perspective and getting help. And, I'm getting into mentorship, and it's like, I think there's a big difference between a CEO who will ask for help and a CEO who won't, right? Because the one who's asking for help is obviously on a path of growth, where someone who won't ask for advice from other CEOs is probably just on a stagnant sort of path.
Well, they're sort of in a funnel or a high tower where they think they know everything. But we've done surveys over the years of people joining Vistage, the CEO joining Vistage. And some of them have increased business 23%, 18%. I have one guy in my group who's up 46% because he just sat back and said, I just don't know what I'm doing. And you can see the increase. And every year I go back, 2024, 2025, and 2026. Tell me how much you made gross, net. I look at the EBITDA. I look at everything. How many people did you hire and expenses? And we compare it over the years. And you can see everyone that's in my group and the growth they predicted since the growth that's happened since 2024.
Yeah. So obviously, I mean, these CEOs, they did something right. They got to where they are. They built the business. They hired people. They got money, most likely successful. But it's hard for those people to say, I don't know what I'm doing. But what gets them to that point? Is it just the stagnation, or how does someone who has a good learning ability come to the point of, I don't know what I'm doing?
It's not that you don't know what you're doing. It is you can run a real powerful business with 8 people, 9 people, 15, and then you start getting 20. Can you manage 20 people? Can you manage 30 people? Can you manage 50 people? So what's missing? What's my blind sides? What am I not seeing? We do test on the CEOs also. Each one of my CEOs has a PI, so we can find out what kind of manager they are. And when they're hiring people, it fits the hiring process. Here's the kind of manager I want. Here's our core values. Here's our mission. Do you want to work for that company when you're being interviewed? And then the other way around, we do this testing of the people that they're hiring. That's what makes it a real smooth operation. Most people hire on looks, and I like the person, and skills. There's more to skills. There's behavior, there's attitude, and then there's skills. We look at all that. Also, we got to see if you're competent. Are you coachable? Are you competent? Most people that are running businesses don't even look at that. And then there's problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, definitely. It's that scaling and getting bigger and bigger, and then how do you manage those employees?
How do you manage a manager?
Yeah.
How do you coach a manager? What's their job? What are you measuring? We look at all that. What's your KPIs, and how do you measure the KPIs? We have companies that have KPIs, but they never measure them. So how do they know they're hitting them?
Yeah, and then I'm sure like pride and ego is probably one of the biggest obstacles. How do you navigate? I mean, is it just here's the numbers and here's how we can boost your numbers? Like, how do you get around that pride and ego that people have?
The people in my group do not have that. They're very transparent. They're very open. There's great, like I just had a meeting on Wednesday with 15 of them. And I have a psychologist in my group, which is pretty interesting. And, you rate your personal, your health, and your business with numbers on a 1 to 10. And I challenge your numbers all the time. And 2 or 3 people said, my relationship, and you can't use a 7 because that's a cop-out. My relationship's an 8. Let's explain the 8. We found out that most of them had a 6, and we sat down and talked about what that actually means. So 3 people started really getting deep into the conversation about their relationship with their wives or their relationship with, and then we ask a lot of questions. And my psychologist was giving tips. I mean, that turned out to be a 2-hour conversation, more than business, because we're going into the holidays and we're talking about, my wife's upset with me. I'm not doing anything wrong, but I'm not here. I'm running a business. So that's the kind of discussion that takes place because that affects business because you come to work with that baggage in your head and then you operate with that baggage in your head.
Yeah, I've definitely learned through, I have a couple ventures. I started with a mold assessment, indoor environmental consulting company, and then I became an attorney, and now the podcasting is turning into its thing. But I've learned that, stress at home is the most important factor, or, they say self-care has to come first. And a lot of people, when you get that big work issue or, the first thing you want to do is kind of escape it or, get a drink or something. But it's really like use self-care to kind of get yourself to the next position. And some people, like in business, a lot of people want to bring on more pressure and responsibility because that's what creates diamonds, right? But super interesting. And so I'm wondering if, can you tell a little bit of your story just from the beginning through radio, through some other hardships I know you talked about on your pods?
There's a lot that went on in my life, and I'm happy everything did. I always start with the story about going to the wrong college. I don't know if you ever heard that story before.
I don't think I did.
In high school, there's a disease called senioritis when you're a senior. I don't know if you ever had it.
I had that. Yeah.
Yes.
I wasn't vaccinated for that.
So I was doing well till senioritis, and then I got a car. And I can tell you that the last year, which is a crucial year, I started going downhill. And I remember I was talking to my best friend, and I said, Bill, you and I, we're never getting in college because everyone rejected us already because you and I kept playing around. Both of us were playing around. So I happened to go to a drugstore, I don't know where, in a small town, and this is in the 70s. I open a book, and it tells you where you can go to college with less grades. And I go, because there's no internet, there's nothing. And I go, oh, here's a college in Miami. It's called Biscayne College. And we can go to Miami, just have a good time. And we can get in, and it's a college. This is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So we both go down to Biscayne College, and we're from New Jersey, and we arrive in Miami in August. And I go, oh, I've never been so hot in my life. Holy mac.
Yeah, it's a wet welcome.
We get into the college, and they're asking me what I want to major in. Well, I don't know what I said, Bill, what are you going to major in? He goes, accounting. I said, okay, I'll put that down, but I really don't want to do anything with numbers. So I'm getting to a point about paying attention to who you are. So in order to pay for the college, because my parents just couldn't afford it totally, even for a college like that, I did work study plans, which I was answering phones, and I was cleaning the school floors, and I was getting paid for that to pay for my education. One day, it was probably October. I was cleaning the floors, and one of the trustees saw me cleaning. He says, you're one of the best cleaners we've ever had. Everything is neat, clean, the dust is gone. And he says, what do you want to do in life? I'm like 19 years old. I said, this is all true story. I go, I want to host a Tonight Show one day. He says, you do? You want to get in broadcasting? I said, yeah, I want to do. He says, well, I'll tell you what. I happen to know the general manager of this radio station in Miami, and I'll get you a job there. So I got a job there, and I thought it was the best. I had to take 2 buses to get there, but I didn't care because I had that job, and this job helped pay for that. And I was a producer for a talk show host, and the job of a producer back then was just to hold up a piece of paper and say, I had to answer the phone. Bill on line 1 wants to talk about this. And you hold up a piece of paper on a window because he's in the studio and you're behind glass like that. And then what happened is that after being there 2 weeks, the guy called me into his studio and he says, Chet, you do a very good job. What do you want to do? And these questions are tough for me at 19. I said, I like to do what you're doing. I remember saying that. And he said, oh, you want to get into broadcasting? I go, I guess that's my line. I got to get into broadcasting. So he said to me, I'm going to tell you get out of here and get to 2 different colleges. He goes, Syracuse University is a great college of broadcasting, or Emerson College in Boston. And me being who I was, I said, I never heard of either one of them. Could you tell me which college to go to? He said, I'd pick Emerson because I can help you get in there. I said, okay. And he said, when you get in there, you're going to let me know how you're doing. I said, okay. Now, the kicker of this guy, nobody ever heard of him, but you heard of him now. His name was Larry King. He's the one that coached me into getting into broadcasting. And Emerson was a great college. I mean, it was tougher than nails because I really had to crack down and study. And everything you did was audition. I mean, if I wanted to be on the college radio station, I had to audition.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to do TV, I had to audition. And also I had to, I wanted to get jobs in the Boston market in order, I don't care if it was an intern or not, so that you have something on your resume. So it was different life for me. But now I go back to the environment. The environment at college was incredible. The people that graduated from that college, unbelievable. My psychology classmate was Jay Leno. He became the host of The Tonight Show. There's another guy named Kevin Bright. He lived upstairs. He wanted to be a writer. I never saw him when he went to Hollywood, but I saw his name on one of the TV shows. I don't think he has to work a day in his life because he helped create a TV show called Friends.
Heard of it.
But that's the environment I was in. There were stand-up comedians everywhere. I had the guy who ran the Big Apple Circus in New York City. He was best friends with him. You don't know where people are going in life, and you don't know what they're doing. There's people on Broadway today. And, I would go to the movies, and I'd sit at the end. Most people walk out. I'm watching the credits. I went to school with him. I went to school with him. I saw, they're everybody, the executive producer or engineer for Good Morning America I went to school with. So environment that's how I got better, by being around people who were better than me and who wanted to do better. So now you asked me about the ride that I was taking, the journey. So I'm now at Emerson. I'm now on the air. I get a morning show. I started in Manchester, New Hampshire. Then I moved to Indianapolis, Indiana. And then I moved to Tucson, Arizona. And I'm a morning guy in all these places. And I get a phone call from my friend who went to Biscayne, who lived on the second floor's girlfriend. Said, hey, we're looking for a consultant in New York City. Mm-hmm. I put your name in. Now I talk about that wrong school was the right school because I got to be coached by Larry King. I got my job in New York City as a consultant. I was a senior vice president at 28 years old in New York City. And back then, if you don't work in New York, you're nothing. You had to have New York on your resume.
So what were you doing as a consultant? Like, what were you consulting on?
I was flying around to radio stations. I was teaching on-air people how to be better on air. I was coaching the news guys on how to do better newscast. And I also helped with the sales department. But I had been trained in all that before I did that because I was just a disc jockey, a morning person. Let's call it a morning personality. Nobody liked to be called disc jockeys. So when I got to New York, they trained me for all this. They reinvented me, how I dressed, my glasses, my hair, get rid of your mustache, certain clothes I had to wear. And then they had it mapped out because I would travel the United States. Here's what you wear in the South. Here's what you wear in the Midwest. Here's what you wear in California. Here's how you go. It was a science.
PR training. Yeah.
Exactly. And then I went with the absolute best program directors in the United States, and I sat with them for a week just to make sure that I was getting trained. And then I was on my own.
Wow. Awesome.
So I wrote a book, how to be a great on-air personality. And some of the people today who are coaching air talent refer to my book. So I guess it worked.
Awesome. Yeah. So many cool characters that we all know. Larry King, Jay Leno. I know you mentioned Howard Stern, who I think you and him have the same voice almost.
Almost, maybe.
Is that a learned voice or is that just your voice because you got a good radio voice?
That was a good voice. That's, in the beginning, you're not sure. But the vocal variety is taught to you. It's some kind of cadence. Plus the fact I'm from New Jersey, I had to get rid of that accent because people from New York and New Jersey talk just a little bit different. And now it's okay, but back then you had to have a Midwest accent.
Yeah, interesting. And for radio, it has to be kind of calming, your voice kind of keeps people calm, like an ASMR.
I'm older. When I was younger and worked in top 40 radio, it was much more upbeat and much more energetic. And when you're on the air and you're listening to music, everyone hates the disc jockey talking over the beginning of the song. But that was the best part for me because I was my energy was towards the music. It was a rock song. It was rocking. I was rocking when I was talking. If it was a slow song, I would slow down, and do that. But that was so much fun. Now it's not the same. It's just not the way it is today.
Yeah. And if you're listening right now and you don't know what radio is, that's the thing that used to be in cars and even carried around on your shoulder, which is still a big thing. But I think now podcasting and social media is.
You have so many different opportunities today.
Yeah.
I think it's easier and tougher. The reason being is that everyone can't be the same. You got to stand out. And there are too many platforms for you to be on one.
Yeah, and there's so much competition. I mean, there's so many podcasts, but the benefit being there is nobody else like you. So if you just be yourself and put out content, I think there's so much room for success. It literally doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're passionate about it, I think people will follow that. And I say, like, if it's chasing butterflies in a field, then you can make good videos with that. And there's someone somewhere wants to see your kind of content. And even if they don't, they like to see passion. They don't have to have the same passion, but just seeing someone who has a passion, people are like, well, why can't I have a passion? And that's a big thing on my podcast and my mentorship is like, pursue your passion. That's what I always say. And I think it's an interesting topic about passion. Like, not everyone knows what their passion is.
Is this your passion to do this podcast?
It is. It's one of the avenues. I think my passion is really helping other people overcome obstacles. And I think I'm definitely, I'm starting a mentorship program. And
that's awesome.
I'd like to be a life coach sort of person, which it's interesting how all these terms are kind of interchangeable almost. Like, I'm a consultant, but I was coaching here, I was selling here, I was networking here. Like, there's so many different terms for someone who wants to.
But they all mean different things. A coach does these things. A mentor does these things. And sometimes I see people intertwining them because it's not the same. So either when I'm getting hired, I go, what do you want? You want me to train, coach? You'd have to tell me because it's two different approaches.
So what is the difference between training and coaching?
Coaching is that the answers are inside you and I got to pull them out with questions and I got to be empathetic. And I also have to know how far I can pull it out and how deep I can. Training is basically training you. Here's how you do things, A equals B, follow this line. I find that coaching helps people better because you have the answers inside you. You know the answer is just blocked and covered up, and I got to be able to pull it out. And I've seen I'm working with so many businesses where I've seen people who were a pain working for, Chet, they've just changed. No, they didn't. It was inside them the whole time. And I've just pulled it out of them. And they're doing better. And, I look at behavior. Behavior is the most important thing in any job, more than anything else.
Yeah. And not just a job, but in anything, like behavior. And I think it's interesting how psychology always comes up. And obviously we're humans, like understanding human nature is probably key to everything. But do you think psychology is kind of like the most key thing in general? Like, I've been thinking about getting back into education again. I'm like, should I do medical? Should I do psychology? Should I do like a business master's? What's like the number one you think most helpful in terms of coaching?
I don't know if it's psychology, but I think it's the questions that you ask people because they need to know where they're going. When I'm coaching somebody, it starts with mindset. You want to be coached. Are you coachable? What would you like to get out of this? Say we're looking a year from now. I want to know what success looks like to you, and I want to know from your boss what success looks like to them, and let's compare the two before we even start. And you're going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to track behavior, and you're going to track a lot of things. If you're open to that, I'm willing to work with you. If you're not, in the beginning, it's a rough ride because you're caught in your habits. And I don't think habits can be replaced, but I think new habits can be created.
Which can fill in the gap.
Yes.
Sort of replace the old habits.
Sure.
And I've been thinking a lot about that. Like, you can't just stop the bad habit. Like, you have to replace it, or you have to start another good habit, or else the bad habits are, I haven't actually read Atomic Habits yet, but I've heard great things. I have a copy of it.
It's a very simple book. It can change your life. There's so many books out there that I have a handful, about 10. I give them as presents.
Yeah, me too. I think that's the best gift you can give someone is personal development. And, either that or cash, because who wants a Starbucks gift card? But yeah, really important. And someone I just had on my pod talks about the ABCs: association, books, and conferences. That's his thing.
Mm-hmm.
But super fascinating. And then I wanted to touch a little on something you mentioned on, I think it was your last episode, about prostate cancer, which of course, so sorry to hear, but it seems like you're almost happy that or grateful that it happened in a lot of ways.
It was a heck of a learning experience.
Yeah.
So I had an MRI done, and they said to me, "We found these 2 little dots up in your prostate. We think it's cancer. So we're going to check it out." And they call it Gleason 6. And Gleason 6 means it's the lowest form of cancer. And they check your blood all the time, PSAs, and it was steady. So we just checked it. Well, cancer is a very smart unit, and I'll tell you what I've learned. Cancer can stay small and then decide to grow. And once it's small, you can't attack it because it has a protective shield around it. And once it starts growing, the shield comes off, and then you can attack it. So what would happen they would check my blood again, and the PSA went up. And he said, "Okay, we have a couple of options." He went down all the options, and he said to me, "One of the options I think you should go for is the proton radiation." So what's that? He says, "It's brand new, maybe 5 years old. And what it does, it shoots a proton right into your cancer cell. The cancer will be there, but it destroys the mechanism to make it grow. And then a year from now, it should be destroyed because it can't grow, so it destroys itself," which is a very fascinating story to me.
And
so why
painless.
It's
to shoot a proton into you is painless.
Correct. So I said, "Okay, I'll do that." So during the whole process, my mind thinks of business all the time. So during the whole process, I went to get an MRI. It was a different kind of MRI because it scans your entire body. They see everything inside of you. And what they do is they take a picture of it and they send it to the proton center. So when I got to the proton center, and that scan is underneath you on a table.
Mm-hmm.
This machine is twice the size of this room, and it circles around you. So the first thing was, I have to do 38 of these. So my first thought was consistency. It's 2 minutes each time I go down there for 38 times. So I thought, wow, I teach about consistency all the time. Small little incremental consistencies really build something. You can see the 1%, 1%, 1% over time. So I thought about that. And then when I got there and they put you on this table and they put the MRI, they're looking to shoot just into the cancer cell because it can destroy good cells. And that's what chemotherapy does. It destroys other things besides the cell. So they put me on the table. You're naked except for a towel on you. And you're on top of the MRI photo that's underneath you. And you're in this room. And the camera comes around this way. And then the camera comes around that way. That's what takes the time because it's alignment. And they all come in the room and go, "Okay, we got to move you this much," like fractions, because the laser could see right where it was going.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, wow, business has understood the importance of alignment. Is everyone aligned? Is everyone because the bad people are like cancerous, and you're destroying good. If you let bad habits, good people leave. If you let people not follow your culture, they get upset and leave. So I'm thinking, okay, I could write. I'm really writing something about that. And the last aspect of that was the people there were so friendly. It was like a family. "Hey, Chet, how you doing? Come on in. There's coffee over there. There's water over here." When you're ready, we go in the room. I'd go in the room. All the technicians that work on you. What movie did you see this week? It wasn't cold. And I said, well, what movie did you see? And I remember him going, you got to go watch F1. It's a brand new movie. You got to go watch F1. And so these things are in my mind. And, and I look forward to going there. It wasn't, it was, first of all, 38 days driving down from North Palm to Delray is an hour. My stress level was traffic. Not going there was the traffic. If I don't make it on time, I miss my window. So I would leave. My appointment was at 7:30 a.m., so I left at 6:10 to make sure that if there was an accident, I could take another alternate route. So
Still cutting it close, but yeah, that's pretty early.
Pretty early, but there was a lot of traffic. And when I was done, they gave me a card with everyone's signature on it and says, congratulations, you finished your proton. And so I left there going, this is a story. This is a business story about how polished and professional this unit is and how we should put this. Oh, and tracking, I think most companies don't track. So I used it as a positive thing. Today I went to get checked for my blood. And that's when he told me that we'll check your PSA numbers and it should go down. If it doesn't, we'll do another MRI and see if there's cancer somewhere else. But other than that, he said it's going to take about 6 months before the cancer eats itself because it can't grow anymore.
Fascinating. Yeah, I've dealt with it in my family. I won't say who necessarily, but like melanoma, which is pretty bad.
I had it on my nose.
And they had
radiated.
You said radiation?
Radiation.
Chemo.
I don't know what it was. They put a mask over you and they radiated every day for
interesting
3 months. So
first we tried chemo, then that was a bad reaction. Then they tried something new called immunotherapy, which is, have you heard of it?
No.
It's I think who had melanoma? It was the president Carter. Some president did, who I think is still alive, but it's this immunotherapy where we're actually just boosting up your immune system.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just makes it go away. But in my own life, when I was 12-ish, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which if people listening don't know, you got to take insulin for sugar. Insulin brings your sugar down, and you basically have to watch everything you eat. Every meal is carb track, finger prick. That's how it used to be. Now there's all kinds of good tech. And I think for 15 years or so, I pretty much was like, this is not my priority. I'm going to prioritize the other stuff before my health. Because it was a lot. And now that I'm more clear-headed and on the straight and narrow, on this path, I'm noticing wow, it's a lot of work to keep your blood sugar. You get to watch your blood sugar every day do this. So it's one of those, diabetes is one of those things where you constantly see the impact of your decisions, every day. And you're it really shows you, even the stress makes your blood sugar go up. But for me, I feel like that kind of pushed me towards a healthier lifestyle. And I became grateful for it over time because I'm I'm actually healthier than most people now. Or in a lot of ways, I'm in the gym every day. I try to eat right. My blood sugars aren't perfect, but they're improving. But I think it's great how you could tell you're a businessman when you're thinking about your next book in the MRI machine. But I think the intersection of fitness and finance, if you will, or business and body, it's so interesting because your business is kind of like a body. You got the organs and the cells and the tissues, and you have to take care of your business as you would take care of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to take care of your body like a business. And when we were here, when I met you, we started a run club in the lobby, me and my buddy Sahid.
I know. Remember
so we're doing Entrepreneur Run Club next Friday.
That's awesome.
If you want to come run a couple miles or something and a little beach workout in the morning. But I think I like how you guys focus on fitness with your CEOs. Is that a big chunk of it?
That's a big deal. We've had experts come in and talk about, half of them are, I remember one of the guys came in and talked about a Whoop. They all bought their Whoops and they all put them on and they all tracked each other. And one guy said, I took the whoop off because I do drink, and I'm not going to have you guys see that I'm in bad show. He didn't want to be part of the group. And I think after the 8 people who signed up, there's 3 left that help each other. And we talked about, different ways to work out. I've had 2 experts in talking about why you shouldn't spend hours in the gym because it doesn't do anything for you. And it talks about the workouts, about how to work out each muscle to fatigue. His name is Luke Carlton, and he's in Minneapolis, but he studies the body. I have a trainer that I see twice a month, and I'll tell you the funny story. So I'm working out with him, and I said, I'm getting older, but I still would like to look like that 24-year-old guy over there. He said, Chet, I work you out so when you fall, you can get up. That's it. And I thought that was pretty funny.
That is funny. There's always time, I think, to build a 6-pack or whatever it is. I've seen, 80, 90, 100-year-olds that are doing pull-ups. And
it's about hanging, I guess, now. That's the new thing. How long can you hang?
Yeah, hanging. I work on that too. That's a big thing, and it's good for your back. But I think the little things like getting up and down, and like people don't focus on stretching and mobility, and like that's important, especially when you're young, if you want that to carry into your older years.
Moving, yes.
Yeah, always keep moving, and that helps with physically, but also depression and all kinds of things like that. So how did being on the radio, like, has your passion changed since then, or are you still kind of like in the broadcasting space? And how does, if your passion did change, how do you adapt to that?
I don't know if my passion ever changed. I wanted to be, let's go back to being a kid. I mean, it's a tough time being a teenager. Your self-esteem is not the highest. And I thought I could be a broadcaster and I'm a star. So I thought about that, and I thought about, this is really what I want to do. I want to be on the radio. I want to be on television, and I got to be a TV weatherman. I had to take a test, and I was the TV weatherman. I was the announcer for the Phil Donahue show at one point when he was in Chicago. I did the CBS local announcing, and that's all I wanted to do. And I was sports announcer. I became a talk show host. I was able to interview 3 presidents of the United States. That's all I wanted to do. I mean, that's what I really wanted to host the Tonight Show, or I wanted to be the guy who does game shows. I remember someone says, that was your passion? I said, if I could host Jeopardy, if I could host, the Match Game, that's what I really wanted to do. Where that came from, I don't know. I took a turn when I was in Tucson, when I was told I could be a consultant in New York. Chet, you're not going to be on the radio anymore, but you're going to work with lots of radio stations. And then I fell in love with coaching people. I just fell in love with it. I was still in the broadcast business, but I could make you better. I could increase the ratings. I could help with sales. I did that for 5 years before I bought my own radio station. And because I was looking at all these radio stations and they were tripling and doubling their income. Back then in the 80s and 90s, you just had to hold a bucket. And if you had ratings, the money would just pour in. I mean, because where else are you going to go? Yeah, radio, TV, billboards, and newspaper. That's it. There's nothing else. And radio was king. It was just king. We did promotions. We're out everywhere. What changed was that everyone knew the disc jockey's name or the personality's name and not who owned it. Now you know who owned it. You don't know anyone's name on the radio. And that's what changed. And that's when it went downhill. You could name the companies who own things today. You couldn't back then.
Interesting. And yeah, I like to ask about passion because, I was in the mold industry mainly, and that passion kind of came out of nowhere because I just started off as a job, like as a mold tester. I was at a law firm at the time, started doing mold testing, and then I became more involved with the medical side of it and building science and all that. But that was never my passion. But my passion was environmental science. And like you talked about environment, and I've always learned about environment where, the air pollution's affecting us, the water pollution, and now with mold, it's your indoor home that is actually affecting you. But that passion kind of developed. So I learned about mold because I knew that I was pretty good at it. I had a decent community. And that kind of led me to this path of coaching a little bit and podcasting because I grew the community. So I had a little more leverage. But I would find that even with like my mold clients, like a lot of the biggest thing that was holding them back from healing was like fear, anxiety, overload of information. And you're kind of like coaching them, you're mentoring them, being like, okay, first let's go outside and take 5 deep breaths outside of your moldy home. Then let's like write down our options and like let's figure out the budget. And so it's all kind of led me to this path. But do you ever find when you work with like some of the CEOs that you're like, do you ever tell them, look, this isn't your passion, like you're in the wrong business or something like that?
No, I haven't done that. They actually all love what they're doing. The CEOs I work with basically were working for somebody, started their own company, and it exploded on them because they loved what they were doing and they're working in the trenches. Now your company's not worth very much if you're the guy that everyone goes to, because if I was going to sell this company and you were going to leave, I got nothing because you're the guy.
Right.
So the coaching was, I got to get you out of the day-to-day operation, and you need to be the orchestra leader and they need to play the instruments because you're playing every instrument, you're micromanaging, you're doing this, you're not coaching them, on and on and on. So no, I don't think they've lost their passion.
Right.
I have some, they're very aggressive people. I have a guy that moved here from Chile. He didn't know anyone. He moved to Florida and he joined my group and he wanted to be an M&A guy, buying and selling of businesses. And when you join the group, I asked, what's your goal? What do you want to get out of it? And he says, I want to make $1 million in about 1.5 years. People laughed at him. Well, he's been in my group now for 3 years and he just broke $1 million commissions. He's Mr. Aggressive. He learned a lot. He went out and did things. The group has helped him. We all help each other grow.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Fun fact, I was actually in Chile, which is a cool place. But I noticed like I've read a lot of business books and thought about it a lot for my own. I was kind of that same path. I was working for someone, went on my own passion, like it blew up to the point where, I mean, there's a good amount of work. And I think my struggle and a lot of other people's struggle is like, I'm kind of the guy. So how do I trust someone else to come in? And I think trust is a big part of it. And also you have to be willing to let go and not be totally perfect. Like this is why we have liability insurance, errors and omissions. Like the business doesn't have to be perfect. But how do you, I feel like is it tricky to convince people like, hey, you need to let other people do the work?
It's up here. It's all up here in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn how to trust. And you also have to learn how to coach somebody. Most of the trust issues because you've done a lousy job of training them or coaching them. I see that all the time. And if you are not good at coaching and training, get someone who can. You want a second in command. You want somebody who can control everything. You want somebody that you go home at night and say, I'm safe because this guy's running my company. You don't want somebody stealing money from you. You don't want shortchanging you anywhere. So I would say that the biggest thing is trust. I call it being safe. When you go home at night and this guy's running your company, are you safe? Think about it in those terms. And if you are, you got the right guy. And the other thing is that most people don't have a lot of processes. Processes make the job very easy because you know where you're going. I call it the red light, green light, yellow light. Green light, you know what to do, right? A red light, you know what to do. What do you do with a yellow light? I'm either going through it, speeding through it, or I'll stop ahead of time. I don't want any yellow lights in your business. I want to make sure the process is crystal clear. And does it have to be revised and looked at? Sure, because things change. So who's in charge of innovation? Marketing and innovation, two big things that have to be inside a company.
And what would you recommend for someone who's not an entrepreneur at all, that's not a CEO, maybe they're 9 to 5 and they think they don't have time to start anything. Maybe they have 5-10 minutes a day. Realistically, maybe that's what they have. What would you recommend they do in terms of how do I get into like business ownership?
But they're not an entrepreneur?
Right. They're kind of in the 9 to 5. They're probably thinking about entrepreneurship, but and maybe they don't even know their passion.
I don't know how risk averse that person has to be. They have to understand risk. When I bought my first radio station, I was 31. And I really didn't know what I was doing.
Was this you bought a pre-existing station?
Yeah, pre-existing station was dead last in the marketplace. And I turned it around into number 2 and number 2 in billing. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I'll tell you why I didn't know. Because I bought the radio station and I went out talking to the owner and didn't know what questions they asked. So I bought a book on how to buy a radio station. But I stuck it inside another book where they thought I was taking notes. So when I would ask a question, it was from a book that they didn't know I was reading. I didn't know what I was doing. And I also thought, hey, I'm buying the best radio station. It was a Class A FM. That's the worst signal you could buy. Back then, it was 3,000 watts. Your hairdryer has more power than a Class A radio station. So radio stations win by the coverage they have. And this hardly had coverage. And also radio station and FM gets blocked by mountains. I'm buying my first radio station in Monterey, nothing but mountains, and a Class A. And so the signal wasn't clear in a lot of parts of my rating area. The other thing is I remember coming home one day and, you sell advertising and then I forget to collect the money and then I have to put payroll on my credit card. If you're not an entrepreneur, you can't go through this stress. You have to understand there's risk in everything you do. The risk of buying this radio station, learning later that it was a crappy signal. The other thing is that my wife would say, how come our credit cards are so high? I said, well, I'm putting taxes on there and back then you didn't get mileage for it. I'm putting payroll on there. I'm doing the best I can, and it was stressful. And I remember coming home one day and said, I'm responsible for all these people's lives. I knew how to run a radio station, but I didn't know all the different, a phone system. I didn't know about that. Healthcare for the employees. I didn't know about that. Liability insurance. Didn't know about that. Insurance on the tower. I didn't know about that. I knew nothing about a transmitter. I knew nothing about it. What if the tower falls? I knew, I just knew you get on the air, you play music, the guys talk, I go out and sell advertising. So it was an education for me at 31 years old. And I wanted it. I wanted to learn. I wanted to be the best at it. And I wanted to learn also how to manage people. I mean, I had 2 or 3 great consultants to help me out to manage people. And I needed to find people not in the radio business. I wanted people who were manufacturing the car business because I felt that was more competitive than what I was in.
Super interesting. And obviously there's a risk to everything. And a lot of entrepreneurship is being okay with the risk, right? Your courage, your bravery.
I had to learn how to do that. I was terrified.
Yeah.
My stomach was in knots.
I've
never been in debt that much. And so I signed a deal for $1 million back in 1986. Scared out of my mind. The next station I bought, I signed a deal for $5 million. And I wasn't too scared. I said, well, I made it through the $1 million. The next deal was $70 million. It felt like nothing because I had been, so I signed a personal guarantee for $70 million. I don't have it. What could possibly happen? I go bankrupt. So as the numbers just started changing, but the risk of fear started dropping because I was used to it. I could have signed a deal for $150 million. It just didn't. It wasn't the same as the $1 million the first time.
So how do you teach someone to be more risk adverse?
That I don't know. I don't.
But you taught yourself, right? Was it just take the risk, and just because everything?
I believed in myself. I knew the first station. I knew I could do the first radio station. The mistakes I made was from the beginning to the end, and I made a lot of mistakes. One of them is I didn't vet my partner. consulting radio stations, I met a guy on the road and said, hey, we should buy a radio station together. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. We were just friends. We were both young. He was 28. I was 31. So we both started raising money to buy a radio station together. Did I think it was going to happen? No. But I got my money from a guy out of Chicago named W. Clement Stone, who was partners with a guy named Napoleon Hill, who wrote a book, Think and Grow Rich. And so he was able to get me, because I did a favor for him. He got me the $1 million for my first radio station, and I had to pay him back on that first $1 million. Well, my partner was crooked. I didn't know that. My partner didn't understand, we're starting up a business and we're just running this thing lean, and he wasn't running it lean. He was buying new cars on the station that I didn't know about. He was fixing the numbers in the books because we had split our jobs up. You take care of this and I'll take care of this. And there was a lot of things that went wrong. So we bought the station for $1 million, sold it for $3 million. I walked away with $50,000 because of the lawsuits, the mistakes, and everything else. But I call that my first $1 million education. Can you handle that? Who can handle that? The second and third station were a lot better. I made money on them because I learned my lesson. I got to vet people. People are the reason you either go up or go down.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how like these risks are also lessons. Like you can handle that. What's the worst case scenario? Like you can handle that, but if you fail, you're going to learn. It's not like you're going to fail, your business goes bankrupt, and then you just wither away. And I mean, some people might, but you're going to learn, and if you're listening to this, you're probably on that path already of, I want change. I want something bigger. And
sometimes you don't learn from failures. It took me a while, and I had to find out. For instance, hiring people. I liked you. I think you could do the job. They didn't. I did that over and over again. I didn't know. There's got to be a way to hire people where I can find out they're the right people, because I was doing it all wrong. And I didn't wake up for a while because you're good? All right. You came from this radio? Great. And I bring you on staff, and I don't know what happened. They just weren't good. And I kept making that mistake over and over and over again. And I kept asking, what do you do to hire? How do you find? And then finally I learned about hiring practices, better questions to ask, testing people. I mean, that took me a while. So if you make mistakes, you got to be aware that if you make it again, get someone who can help you. Because I made that mistake 5 years of hiring the wrong people, building the wrong team.
Yeah, and people don't realize like hiring is a business. Like hiring is something you have to study.
And I hated every minute of it.
Yeah. And it's not your passion probably.
Yeah.
Or maybe now it's somewhat of a passion, but
now I know how to do it better, and I know what to look for. And I also know I coach a law firm today, and I said, you're not hiring the way you used to hire. We're going to do it this way. And they're hiring some great associates now.
Yeah. And hiring is one of those super crucial things. Like you have to, I think it was the 10X book. They say you have a unique ability. Like everyone has a unique ability.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the stuff, you want to delegate that to people who that's their unique ability. Like you should probably have a hiring manager who is really solid on hiring. Have HR who does HR, and have the best janitor who cleans the hallways the best. It's funny. It's kind of like a Good Will Hunting story you have with the janitor or whatever the PC term is, janitor.
You call them building engineers now.
Yeah. But so much great stuff there. And have you found any of this? Are you married with kids?
Yes. I have grandkids too.
Has all this translated into that marriage and kids? Like, do you employ this business savvy in any of that, or is it?
My kids are doing very, very well. Whenever they were looking for a job, they would sit down with me, we'd go over resumes, and then I would role play the interview with them. They're both somewhat entrepreneurs. One works in a company right now that checks on all Wall Street trading. She does that. And another one started her own business. She does web designing and
SEO,
everything that you want to do with that. She started her own business. But because there's so many people in the field, I said, you need to focus on one. And she's focusing on a field that called tattoo companies. They do not have people working with them on SEO or websites. So she goes to all the tattoo seminars, and she gets them as clients because no one's focusing on them. So she's narrowly focusing on a certain area. And the interesting thing is, my wife would say to me, I don't know what you did to these kids, but they're drivers. My last name is Tart, and both of them are married, and they have different last names. But when they were talking about changing jobs or going through risk, my daughter would say, Tarts never lose. I got that from you, Dad. You never lose. You just get up and start going. So, and the grandkids, they're 12, 6, and 5. And I actually read them the book Think and Grow Rich, and we go over chapters and how they can prepare for their life. And I tell them every mistake that I made in life that I want them not to make, and every success I made, they could copy. So I do that with them. I don't know if it sticks or not, but it sure did stick with my 2 daughters. They're both doing very well.
Awesome. And that's, beautiful. Glad to hear you have a beautiful family. And I'm wondering, as I know we're wrapping up, and I like to have the guests leave like a mentorship kind of mantra. But I'm thinking, so if you're talking to your grandkids who are probably 12, 5, and 6.
I have 12, 7, and 6. Excuse me. They had birthdays.
12, 7, and 6.
They just had birthdays.
Yeah, don't say 6, 7. That's a thing that'll drive them crazy.
I know.
But 7, 6 is okay. But so, I'm guessing maybe the 12-year-old is more in that spot of going against the grain and, against what the 99% of people are. So what's a good mentorship kind of mantra that you say to those grandkids, for example, about following their passion? Like, how do you you read them the business book, but what are some good, like you talked about the risk aversion?
They ask me a lot of questions. I don't know if I leave them any nuggets of anything right now because I think they're too young.
Well, let's leave one for
I talk about the burning desire. What is a burning desire? And that's what we're talking about. It's passion. And each one of them sit down and what do you really want to do? And I have one who's a sports fiend, and he loves that. And he loves sports. But then I found out he's creative, and he wants to be an architect. And we had to pull that out of him, create things. And what he wants to do is create things. My granddaughter wants to be a dancer. These things we've never discussed until we started talking about creativity. And the 12-year-old who is in the room all the time and really doesn't participate in anything because he's going to be 13 next month. He's going to be a teenager. I sat there and talked to him, and, I don't know. And then he said, Pop, I think that I'd like to create, what do you call those games, those electronic games?
Video games.
Mm-hmm. He said, because they're so interesting to me and intriguing, and they're in my head, and I think I like to do that. Now, whether they follow through on that is up to them. So I'm teaching a master's class at FAU, and I'll leave you with this. And I always start my class that I teach, and I don't do it full time. I'm a fill-in person. I'll say to them, driving in today, I wish there was one billboard that was in front of FAU, and the billboard would have a warning sign on it and saying, as you drive in, warning, you are a product of the 5 people you hang with. So watch your environment.
Yeah, it's so true too. And it took me a while to realize that, but as much as it stinks to kind of change people in your circle, you have to. Unless you're lucky enough to have those 5 people that are on that growth path.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, usually 99% of the people in your high school are not the right people for you to be hanging out with. That's so important. And the environment, whether it's your actual indoor, outdoor environment, or your environment is the books you read, the people you're with, the podcasts you listen to, that's so important. And I think if I had kids, when I do, I would say do that thing that you're passionate about, and it might change over time, and that's fine. Like, through all my mold business, and I found out like I love creating content and I love editing videos, and random passions will come up. You never know where it'll take you, but keep moving forward. Keep paddling the boat, and you'll figure out where you're going. You don't have to know where you're going, right? Just keep going and stay positive, and make money and save money, right? Because that's what allows you to take the risk. Like, you should be financially literate and save some money, or else it's hard to.
It's not taught, and people don't know how to do that. Have you read the book Think and Grow Rich?
I've heard of it, the book. I haven't read
change
that.
your life. And the other book I just finished was called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? Have you read that one?
No.
These are
I'm
phenomenal.
behind. Yeah, I used to read a lot when I was young, which my grandparents literally like bribed me into reading. And I think that helped me a lot because I was ahead of my whole class. I was perfect scores on the FCATs and got through law school. And I think reading is the best, but I stopped for about, I don't know, let's say 10 years. And then really when I started my business, I started reading again. And the 10X is easier than 2X really helped me be like, how do I value my time? It's not worth it to drop my price just to go get a sale. Like, use that time somewhere else. But what really saved me was having a little bit of money that was put away. It was invested in like a Roth IRA but having a little bit of cushion. So definitely, like, if you're thinking about breaking out of the shell and the 9 to 5, like, put some money aside, skip the Chipotle or the Starbucks. $5 a day actually adds
Follow
up.
somebody who does that.
Yeah.
Follow somebody who, Ray Dalio, you know who he is? He's one of the big hedge fund guys in New York. And how he ran his company was intriguing to me, and what he did was intriguing. I happened to be down in Fort Lauderdale and interview his second in command, and got all the information that I needed to get what made this the biggest and the best hedge fund in New York. And you just be curious enough to know that you can contact anybody. People who used to write books, people who still write books, and talk to them personally. What made you write that book? What was in your brain? I just had a speaker come in who wrote a book about how he turned bankrupt businesses around and sold them for billions. It blew everyone out of the water. There's a lot of stuff in there that you already know, but how it's executed is totally different.
Yeah, and just someone else's perspective, like the way someone else describes something, like, and the execution, like, you never know how hearing someone else's perspective can just, oh, I never thought about it that way. But super, super interesting. Really awesome conversation. I think we could probably have a bunch more. But do you have any final thoughts for anyone before I think we covered a lot of it.
I think we covered a lot today. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chet Tart, thank you so much for joining me.
And thank you.
I appreciate it.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thanks.